Hi everyone, Professor King here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Annotated Bibliography assignment, otherwise known as Essay 3. That name's a little deceptive though, because as we'll find out, this is not a traditional or typical essay in terms of format. It does not have that sort of introduction with thesis, body, and then conclusion that we're so used to. Instead, this is essentially a works cited page where you talk about the research sources that you're citing within the text of the essay. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. But I'm going to take it to a share screen. Again, as I always say at the beginning of these videos, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to contact me via Canvas, email, Zoom, Pronto, whatever works best for you. The only way I would say not to contact me is through YouTube. My YouTube channel is pretty much only to post these videos for my students. So I don't typically respond to YouTube comments unless they're nice or unless I'm in a particularly snarky mood. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's take it to the share screen. Oops, that's our class page. Go to our annotated bib. Okay, so some of you might be in this class and have done an annotated bibliography before. Great. If you haven't, that's also fine. It's not as hard as you think. And this assignment, even though it looks like a lot of words, is going to tell you exactly what you need to do and exactly what my expectations are, so that when you get to constructing the annotated bibliography, it's a piece of cake. All right, so what is it? It's a list of citations to books, articles, and documents. Each citation is followed by a brief descriptive and evaluative paragraph, the annotation, which is roughly half a page double-spaced, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 2/3 of a page double-spaced. The purpose of the annotation is to inform the reader of the relevance, accuracy, and quality of the sources cited. So think of it as a blending of your works cited with the type of writing you do in a body paragraph. You're gathering research that you will use in your final essay. Once you've read your sources, you'll cite each one on a Word or Google document, and make sure that you not only summarize the source, but you analyze it as well. Now I want to pause here because I want to reiterate the notion of the word summarize, right? In an annotated bibliography, you are not using direct quotes. I want to repeat that one more time. In an annotated bibliography, you are not using direct quotes. I know that in other essays, and especially your discussion board assignments, I ask you to use direct quotes. In the annotated bibliography, your job is to summarize well. So if we think back to what summarizing well is, say to our 100 classes or a course before that, when we summarize well, what we do first is we present the writer's overall argument. And then we provide the overarching details that that writer gives to illustrate that argument. In other words, we're telling our reader in our summary what we believe that writer's thesis statement to be, and then the list essentially of body paragraph claims and maybe a little bit of evidence that they use to present it. So do not use direct quotes in your annotated bibliography. Summarize well, and then analyze well, just like we do in the final part of our body paragraphs, right? Sorry, there's a bug flying in front of me. You want to analyze here, and I'll talk about how to do that in just a moment. But essentially, your annotated bibliography, for each of the 4 entries, it will be citation, just like you do on a works cited page, and then a brief summary of the source, and then analysis of the source. That's it. You just do that 4 times over. However, you got to be you have to have a little bit of variety in your annotations. So it should contain 4 sources of various types. Please don't go on Statista and just give me 4 statistical sources, right? That's not a lot of reading. You should have scholarly journal articles, theoretical texts. Yes, you can have one that's up-to-date data and statistics, a historical source, a biographical source, a counter-argument source, et cetera, et cetera. But do not have all four of the same type. And the whole point of an annotated bibliography is to show the work that you're doing outside of the class. So if we're doing work outside of the class, that means that we're not using class readings, class films, class texts in our annotated bibliography. I'm the one who did the work. As your instructor, I'm the one who did the work to gather all of that to present to you in the class, right? Now your job is to go, oh, this is a cool idea in this film or in this reading. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do outside research, meaning I'm going to look up texts that are outside of our class to research for not just my annotated bibliography, but in preparation for Essay 4, which is really what the annotated bibliography is, right? You're essentially showing me the research that you're doing in preparation for Essay 4. So a lot of times I get the question, is the topic the same for Essay 3 and 4? Ideally, yes, unless you change your mind sort of mid-research. But really what Essay 3 is it's you showing me, here's the research I've done, here's what I have to say about it, and now I'm kind of in the mindset of what my argument for Essay 4 is. So think of it in those terms, okay? So typically same topic, typically same, these four sources will serve as sort of the foundation of the 6 through 8 that you'll have for your final essay. So after this, you should only need to get 2 to 4 more outside sources for that final essay. Which is another reason why you can't get class text, because again, I'm the one who collected those and presented them to you as part of this class. Now it's your job to go find your own. Okay, so how do you compose your annotated bibliography? Well, I'm going to scroll down a little bit so we can see this whole thing. Before you write, consider the arguments surrounding the issue as it's presented in the reading you chose. Your sources may not actually respond to the reading itself, but to the issue that it represents. Okay, so let's say, for example, you want to talk about sort of, the university's failure to address adequately, don't want to split my infinitives there, to address adequately the issue of campus sexual assault. You may be responding to ideas that people like Rebecca Solnit or Gia Tolentino or Director Kirby Dick present, but you don't have to find sources that deal specifically with those readings. Your sources can just deal with campus sexual assault, institutional failure to address campus sexual assault, the history of campus sexual assault, data about campus sexual assault, right? So this is where you start to think outside of the box of the classroom and do your own research that is relevant to you. Same with the prison industrial complex, right? You don't need to find sources that respond to Angela Davis. You don't need to find sources that respond to James Baldwin. You don't need to find sources that respond to Michelle Alexander or Ava DuVernay. But what you need to do is you need to find sources that have to do with that topic, okay? You're going to find four sources in total, and you need to find each of the following types of sources. One source has to be historical context. Why is that? Now that's going to bug me. Oh, Katie. Why do I do these things to myself? I'm just gonna leave it as is. Just gonna do that. Okay. One source that's historical context. And when we're thinking about historical context and things like precedents, right? What sets a precedent? An argument of definition that we learned about throughout this course, right? So think about that when you're looking up historical context, arguments of definition. You're going to want to find one source that provides data or statistics, not from Google. I would recommend using Statista the database from the Fullerton College Library website. And again, when we're talking about statistics and data, we're thinking arguments of fact, because a lot of times when we show people things, we're making an argument about it, right? If I say something to the effect that, fewer than 5% of reports of sexual assault are false allegations, and overwhelmingly, sexual assault does not even go reported, then what I'm telling you with those two facts, right, that the tiny percentage of those sexual assaults reported are falsified, and that not only that, but most sexual assaults aren't even reported, then the argument that I'm giving you, right, is that perhaps we should believe survivors, right? Or perhaps we should take this issue more seriously and just listen to survivors, because the overwhelming odds are they're not lying to us. and in fact, not only are they not lying to us, but the ones who have had to experience, unfortunately, sexual assault aren't even telling us, right? So keep those arguments of fact in mind, because even though they seem like they are neutral or that they're just data, right, they can give us an argument. You're going to want to choose one source that provides biographical or background information about the author, or information about the author that you found in the reading. Now, I'm going to make this one a little more broad. You can find biographical information about any major player that we've or not even that we've talked about, but that you may come across in your research. And the real reason to do this is if we think back all the way to the 3 appeals and the appeal to ethos, what we know about that author, that writer, that rhetor, that orator, that director, that creator of the text, what does knowing biographical information about that person, how does that speak to their credibility? Okay, so you'll want to analyze that. And then your last source, you want to do your yes and yes but. You want to do your contradictory, your counter argument source that you are going to refute. The whole reason we present counter arguments when we're doing research, not the whole reason, but a big reason why we present counter arguments, if we already have our own argument pertaining to the issue, is we are setting them up so that we can refute them, so that we can show why our side is the preferable one. So a lot of students fall into the trap of presenting a counter argument, an argument that is counter to their own, and then just letting it sit there and not engaging with it, not grappling with it, not showing why their side is the preferable one. Now think about that. What's the problem in presenting a counter argument without refuting it? Exactly, right? If you just present it and don't refute it, then there are going to be people in your audience who go, well, I actually like this argument better. Yours kind of stinks, Katie, but this one, it's got legs, right? So, if I'm going to say something to the effect of, yes, there are people who we'll just stick with the sexual assault one, right? Yeah, yes, there are people who misreport, right? And even Tolentino talks about this, and We Come from Old Virginia, right? Yes, that is the case. However, if we know that that's hovering somewhere between 2 and 8%, and recent studies have shown that it's closer to the 2% than the 8%. If we know that the majority of people who survive sexual assault don't even report, then we can wager that this is a major problem. And we can look at those 92 to 98% of not false, of truthful reports, and say, why isn't more being done about this? And why isn't more being done about the sexual assault that just goes unreported, right? So that's why you present a counter argument, right? To refute it, to show why your side is preferable, to do something with it. And why do we do that? Because it shows that we're not just cheerleaders for the cause. that we're objective, that we know that no issue is perfect, but we chose our side because it's the best one. And so you always have to remember that with counter arguments. All right, let's move on. Okay, so we have our topic, we've got, the sources. Now we've read the sources and annotated and did all the active reading stuff we're supposed to do. What is next? Well, we should write and structure the essay, okay? So first you want to locate, read, and record sources, again, outside of what we've studied in class that may contain useful information and ideas about your topic. Then choose those works that provide a variety of perspectives on your research question that addresses that question in some way. That's not very well written. I'll clean that up in a moment. Then the next thing is to cite those 4 sources we found. Again, just 4. Historical, data, statistic, biographical, counterargument, right? We create a works cited page where we cite them in MLA format. Then we write the annotation. And for the first half of the annotation, we just summarize the source. Again, no direct quotes, just summarize the overall argument and then provide the supporting details that the author herself presents to support her argument. Then in the second half of the annotation, this is where you come in, you've summarized, now you tell us how you might use it in your essay for essay 4, where the blind spot is, what the person is leaving out, what the person doesn't acknowledge, where the bias is, what the purpose is, how it addresses your topic, the credibility of the writer, who the intended audience might be, and why that's important. How it speaks to other sources you have out of those 4 and how you might kind of use them in conversation or in conjunction with one another. Any of these little stars down here, right? That's what you're doing in your analysis. And again, you have to engage in exhaustive analysis. So what I mean by that is your analysis can't just be, it's good because it's good, right? Like it can't be that sort of circular reasoning. You have to say, well, if this is important, then what does that mean? And if that's important, what does that mean? And if that's important, what does that mean? And then you go all the way until you've exhausted every possibility of purpose, of bias, of potentiality. And why do you do that? Because again, you're unlocking your inner 5-year-old. I don't know what's inside your head, but you do, and you know why you're going to use these sources in your final essay, and your job is to tell me, right, this is why I'm going to use this, or why it might help, or what it's good for. Okay? That's your job. So analysis is important. That's where the critical thought comes in. All right. So also keep in mind the format is Times New Roman 12-point font, double spaced, 1-inch margins, and properly cited in MLA format. Due dates, check the syllabus. They're also up on Canvas, like as you go through the assignments, on most of the assignments, it tells you when it's due in the title. So keep that in mind. Next, I'm not going to belabor the points here, but I've created in like little Christmas colors, I've created not just all the texts we've written in the left-hand column here, but the topics and ideas and issues that relate to those. So when you're thinking about research for your final essay, please do not come to me and say, I can't think of anything, because there is tons of stuff here to work with, right? And this is broad. Sorry, I'm pointing at it as if you're sitting next to me. Excuse me. This is broad. I want you to get as specific as you can with your topic, but I left it broad so that you can walk down that path yourself. You have like a starting point here, and then you can get more and more specific as you go. I know I'm nice sometimes when I'm not a total monster. And if you've never seen an annotated bibliography entry, this is what it's going to look like. But keep in mind two things. One, I made the margins of this assignment prompt page 0.5 inches so that it would all fit and work out. So yours is going to be 1-inch margins. Also, the font on this is 11. Yours is going to be 12. Again, I just did all this. I altered the margins and the font size so that it all fit on 2 pages. So just bear with that. On yours, again, it's going to be 1-inch margins. It's going to be 12-point font. So you have the title, Annotated Bibliography. You know, if you want to put like, you know, your topic or your working title for your final essay here, that's fine. But for now, I just put Annotated Bibliography. Then you have the entry. I want you to notice something. This is what's called a hanging indent. It's essentially the reverse of a paragraph. You know how in a paragraph, you indent the first line and then every other line is at the margin? A hanging indent's the opposite. For a hanging indent, the first line's at the margin, every other line is indented, okay? So you have a hanging indent, you have the author's last name, first name, the title of the article, the title of the journal from which it comes, the volume, an issue number, the year, and the pages. You have a section in Everything's an Argument that goes over annotated bibliographies, specifically as they pertain to MLA format. All of this is sort of a condensed form of that, but if you would like more information, I highly recommend you read the information in the textbook about annotated bibliographies. All right, so we've got hanging indent, we have the source. Most of the time, people are just going to, you know, go to the library website and then do the MLA, the automatic MLA formatting, which is fine, but just keep in mind two things. One, names are never in all caps. That's a mistake that the algorithm has not yet fixed for a lot of the entries. So if you notice, everything here is the same font, the same size, not all caps, et cetera, et cetera. Also, when you cut and paste them onto your Word document, most of the time they won't have the hanging indent. And so I know what your next question is. It's, well, Professor King, how do I do the hanging indent then? And I will show you. I'll show you for a Word document because in another video and in the conferences, I talked to you about how to do it on Google Docs. So if you have a Word document, you just, and let's say you start out, oh, I'm so old. I mean, not really, but kind of. Okay, so you start out. I'm trying to move this thing. There we go. You guys can't see what I'm moving, but I'm moving my little Zoom stiff. Okay. So you go to Format, go to Paragraph. Okay. I'm going to make it normal. I'm going to make this normal. So it would be the way that you see it when it shows up on your page. Okay. Okay. So let's say you go to the library website, you cut and paste the citation, and it all ends up at the margin. And you go, that's not a hanging indent, that's all at the margin. So then what you do is you highlight the whole dang thing, go to Format, go to Paragraph, go to Special, go to Hanging. And the beauty of this is you can pause and rewind and follow along with me as many times as you need to get that. And then it creates this wonderful hanging indent. And then the rest of your citation is indented as well. It's also double spaced, 1-inch margins, Times New Roman, 12-point font. All right, so that's how we do a hanging indent in Word. So this is the citation, right? This part right here is the citation. Now the annotation is what you do. It's the summary that segues into analysis, okay? Now, what I've done for you here is I've shown you where the summary is and where the analysis is as well, okay? So we have James Harding, and by the way, this is actually from an annotated bibliography that I wrote in grad school. It had like 30 entries. So don't worry, you know, like you only have 4 to deal with at this point. But this has to do with a work of literature. So if you're reading this going, what the heck is this talking about? I wrote a paper on Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure. And this is one of again, like 30 something things that I had to research and annotate. So if it doesn't make sense, don't worry. It's more about me showing you what it's doing than worrying about what it means, if that makes sense. Okay. So we have, title, the entry itself. Now here's the annotation. James Harding discusses the significance of multiple readings of the meeting scene in Jude the Obscure between the characters Jude and Arabella, from the feminist Arabella as castrator view to the Freudian pig penis as Oedipal object perspective, and finally to the semiotic penis as linguistic apparatus view. He then analyzes Thomas Hardy's multiple revisions of that scene and why and how such revisions served during the author's time as responses to the criticism of some of the author's less radical contemporaries. The writer concludes the article with a discussion of how Arabella and Sue, characters in Jude the Obscure, reflect the same anxiety of masculinized women, but in different ways, the former primarily through physicality and the latter primarily through intellect. This article is helpful because it discusses patriarchal fears of being castrated and being sullied by an outside force. It can be argued that imperialists, discussed in other sources in this annotated bibliography, may express similar fears since they simultaneously oppress colonized groups while avoiding much exchange with or influence from them. This article also emphasizes Thomas Hardy's reaction to his peers, which is supported by Gibson's work, Gibson being another author mentioned in that 35 entry annotated bibliography, and how that reaction may have influenced both what he wrote and the extent to which he was willing to write about controversial subjects. Okay, so again, don't worry about what it says, worry about what it does. And look at these words that are bold and italicized. In your annotated bibliography, they will not be bold and italicized. They will be just the same font as everything else, okay? But what you're doing, again, is you're presenting the argument, right? You're giving details, right? And a really helpful kind of way to show that you're segueing from summary to analysis is to give like a final sentence on how the writer concludes this article, this, interview, this chapter, whatever it may be, right? Now we've concluded our summary, and notice in this summary, there is no direct quote. There is an overarching discussion of what Harding is arguing. There are details supporting, right, how Harding argues this, but no direct quotes. We are doing the work of summarizing to show that we've read and we know how to do that. Then we go into conclusion, then we segue into analysis. And if you look at the analysis, it's roughly the same length as the summary. It's not one sentence that says, this is good because it's good, right? We're talking about how we might use it in our final essay, how we might use this source in essay 4, what this does in terms of our developing argument around this topic, okay? This article is helpful because, right, it does this. We even, if you look at here, right, see that I've put it in conversation with other writers that I researched. You can do that too, right? If there's somebody like this person Gibson, right, whose ideas or work sort of overlap with an idea of Harding's, then that's good. Then we can talk about that, right? And we can kind of connect those dots to create a more cohesive picture of our argument, okay? So that in a nutshell is an annotated bibliography. This is an example, you're clearly not going to use, not going to be able to use this for what we're talking about because we didn't read Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure in this class. But you're going to be able to do the same things that this does, which is summarize, right? Overarching argument, main points, concluding sentence, and then analyze how you're going to use it in your essay, why it works, why it doesn't work, how it relates to other research, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And again, everything I'm doing here is exactly what this up here in blue lays out. Okay. So I wanted to not only give you the instructions, but give you an example of what it looks like so that it helps. All right, well, I'm going to take it off share now. I hope that was helpful. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and evening. Bye.